Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we got to talk about the downfall of Carvana. And I'm actually at one of the Carvana locations. Well, actually, I think it's the only Carvana location here in Utah. But before we get into the video, as always, if you want to save time, money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. Let's get into it. Well, I suppose enjoy this site while it still lasts, because, you know, after Carvana goes under, I'm sure some rich dude will purchase this tower so he can, like, store all of his Lamborghinis and stuff. But yeah, it's crazy because look at this. Their lot is still full of cars, and I drove through just to check. They're pretty much all Carvana cars. Like, they all have tags and everything. They're all for sale, so, like, they still have cars as of today. Also, if you guys aren't subscribed already, I recommend you subscribe, because I just walked through that field and completely drenched my shoes because the grass is full of water and stuff. Just to get you guys the thumbnail for today's video for the Carvana stuff, so subscribe. Let's start things off by going over some statistics. So last year, Carvana sold over 425,000 cars, generating over $12 billion in revenue. And this year is actually looking to be pretty solid from a volume perspective, because they're still tracking to sell over 400,000 cars. However, they are hemorrhaging about $500 million per quarter, which equates to about $2 billion in loss per year. So Carvana still can't figure out how to run a profitable car sales business. And this is why their stock as of today is down by over 95% from the peak. Now, that $2 billion yearly loss would not be a huge issue if they were still generating around $12 billion in revenue for the 2022 sales year, but that certainly is not going to happen. We'll have to wait until the end of the year to see exactly how much money they make this year, but it's not going to be anywhere near $12 billion. And so instead of being in a loss percentage of, 15, 16%, I bet it's going to be closer to like 50+%. Again, we'll see when we get the end of the year numbers. But what we have to discuss in today's video is, hey, is this just, a fluke, right? Is this just growing pains for Carvana? Are they going to be able to basically get out of the situation, or is Carvana doomed? And is this going to bring down the entire market with it? Because again, you have to look at the sales numbers, right? Carvana sold over 400,000 cars last year, and they are on track to sell at least that many cars this year, despite the car market downturn that we're experiencing. And so they are a huge portion of the overall used car market. So if something happens to Carvana, something's going to happen to the entire market. First off, Carvana's entire business model is completely flawed, because it is doing business based on the assumption that you can actually make direct-to-consumer sales with used cars work. And well, it doesn't. We only have one example of a manufacturer that makes new cars that does direct-to-consumer sales that actually works, and that's Tesla. They do a really good job, but outside of Tesla, nobody else has been able to make it work with new cars, and nobody's been able to make it work with used cars. The closest we have with used cars is CarMax, but guess what? CarMax still has physical dealerships, and I'm going to call them dealerships because that's what they are, because they have finance managers, they have salespeople, they have people dedicated to going and basically inspecting cars. They're used car managers. Like, they have all the same dealership personnel that a regular dealership has. They just happen to have a slightly different name on the front end, and they operate a little bit different from regular dealerships, but it's actually really close when you look at the nitty-gritty with CarMax. And so Carvana making the assumption that they could do something that was completely different from everyone else, right? It's like, good idea. Sometimes creativity pays off, but in this case, creativity did not pay off whatsoever. First off, because Carvana doesn't have a set of traditional dealership staff, that means that they are going to make a lot of mistakes when it comes to buying and selling cars. And what some people might think is, well, they don't have to pay as many people. And although that's true, the people that you're paying do really important stuff for dealerships. If you have traditional dealership staff, you have used car managers that will make sure that they don't overpay for crappy cars. And then you'll have the sales staff that actually know how to sell cars and explain the benefits of buying a certain car over another car. Carvana doesn't have any of that, right? Again, they're trying to do direct-to-consumer sales. And so what that means is they're consistently overpaying for crappy cars, and they have nobody to explain why they should pay for that crappy car they have. And on top of that, they don't have the resources to recondition all of these cars. And so think about this, right? They're buying this really crappy car that needs a lot of work. They're not putting any work into it. And then they're just trying to sell it to someone. And then people are seeing that and they're going, oh, wait, why is this priced so high? Why is it in such bad condition? I'm just going to go buy somewhere else. Or I'm going to give Carvana a really, really low offer. And if they accept it, then yep, I guess that's what we're going to do. And that's what has been happening with Carvana, is they are having to accept these huge lowball offers and lose tons of money selling these cars just to basically buy customers because they have crappy inventory. Now, they did buy Odessa earlier in the year. It might have been last year. Sorry if my timing's off on that. But either way, they bought a huge auction resource that was supposed to make it so that they could basically recondition more cars, and it would also give them the ability to be a little bit more in the auction scene. And well, spoiler alert, it hasn't helped them out at all because a lot of dealerships have now like boycotted that auction. They don't want anything to have to do with it because they don't want Carvana cars. That's something that is really big here because everyone knows that Carvana cars are way too much money for what you're getting because they are complete junk because they don't have proper inspections happen when they purchase those cars. It's just a person with a clipboard just going check, 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 check. Okay, we'll buy your car. We'll pay the biggest amount of money for it compared to anyone else because, again, we're trying to buy you as a customer. And again, when you're trying to grow and scale a business like what Carvana has done, it works in the short term, but over the course of the long term, especially when you're going into an economic downturn, doesn't work. Now, if selling people crappy, overpriced junk wasn't enough to tank Carvana, they're also having issues with vehicle titles. And this is causing them to lose their dealer's license in a bunch of different states. And I promise this will only continue as time goes on. And so Carvana's overall market is literally shrinking. Obviously, the economy right now is shrinking, so their market's shrinking in terms of the buyer base, but their market's also shrinking because there's less and less states that are willing to work with Carvana. And it's gotten to the point where Carvana is like desperate. What they are doing is if you live in a state where their dealer's license has been blocked, they'll literally have like a pop-up on their website that will ask you to contact your state legislation and basically get them to try to give back Carvana their dealer's license. Like it's a very humorous situation. Like it's so bad it's funny. That's what I'm trying to say. But anyways, with this whole title issue, they wouldn't have to deal with this if they had traditional dealership staff, because in a traditional dealership, you have a salesperson that will go to the ends of the earth to make sure that that title situation gets resolved, because salespeople do not get paid on car deals until everything has been done, where the deal is what is called quote unquote booked. And so that means that the title of the vehicle has to be within the deal, like the proper hands, whether it's the dealership, the lender, or whoever is going to be the owner of that vehicle after it gets traded in. Well, Carvana doesn't have that. And so what's happening is people are trading in cars, and then Carvana's never getting the title, and then Carvana's selling the car to someone else, and then maybe that person that bought the car is selling it to another person, and now you have this whole string of people that have quote unquote owned this car, but the title was never originally signed in the first place, and Carvana never had anyone track it down. And again, that's why they're losing their dealer's license. It's not a good situation whatsoever. And so I'd be very, very wary of buying a car from Carvana, because there's a chance that you might buy a car and think that you own that car, but in reality, you don't actually own that car because Carvana never got the title. Now, I could go on and on as to why Carvana's business model is a complete failure and why direct-to-consumer sales with used cars will never work. But seriously, there's just too many variables. I know that nobody likes dealing with used car dealers, but it's a necessary evil with how complex the used car market is. And so with that being said, Carvana is dying, and in the very near future, they are no longer going to exist. Like, a company cannot continue to lose money every single year and have people still willing to invest in it. On top of that, Carvana cannot continue to keep selling these crappy overpriced cars and convince people to buy them, right? It's just a lose-lose for everyone. It's not a system that works. It's very deeply flawed. And so what this is going to do to the overall car market is really dependent on when this whole situation happens. If Carvana just, decides that they're done today, then it would actually be pretty rough, because right now the used car market on average is declining by about 1 to 2% per month. And so if we had an influx of, all the cars that Carvana currently has in inventory, which I think is a pretty massive amount, because when I went and took that silly thumbnail for this video, this was the first time that I've ever seen that specific tower. And I know this is just like a local thing, but that specific tower full of cars, and their entire parking lot was also full of cars. Prior to the last few months, that tower was almost always like pretty much empty. Like I remember at one point there was no cars in that tower. And it wasn't because it was under construction. It was because Carvana was constantly sold out of cars and there was nothing to put in the tower. And so they've got a lot of inventory that if it flooded the market right now, it would be absolutely devastating. And so it's really just going to be a timing thing. If we get through this whole slump that we're dealing with now and the used car market kind of levels off and then all these Carvana cars flood the market, well, we're going to have a drop, but it's not going to be as bad as if it happens today. And so again, it ultimately just depends on when this whole situation happens. What would be really kind of funny because of how bad the situation would be is if all of the Carvana cars hit the market at the same time that all the flood cars hit the market. And I mean, with the luck that we've had over the last few years, that's probably what's going to end up happening. And so all I have to say is I would hold back when it comes to buying a used car because the market has a lot more pain to go through before things actually level off with everything that's happening. With that being said, I want you guys to let me know what you think about on this whole Carvana situation. See ya.